Xena Olsen presents Every Breath You Take, a CTI review of Stalkerware. Learn why Stalkerware is an emerging threat to enterprise and how it can lead to a breach. Hunt for Stalkerware using OSINT and learn some quick tips on how to reverse engineer Android APKs.
Hi everyone, I'm Cheerio, also known as Xena Olsen. I am excited to share with you a CTI review of Stalkerware. So thank you for having me here today, and welcome to Every Breath You Take, a CTI review of Stalkerware. And today I'm going to share why Stalkerware is an emerging threat to enterprise. So I'm Xena Olsen, also known as Cheerio on Twitter. I'm a Blue Team Village senior lead, a doctoral student in cybersecurity at Marymount University, a cyber threat intelligence analyst, a SANS Women's Academy graduate. I have an MBA in IT management. I have 7 GX certs, and I really like 80s music. So I created a repo for you at the bit.ly link in the slide with a threat summary report you can use for your TIP or threat intelligence platform and IOCs or indicators of compromise. So before we get started, I'm going to have a really quick note from the lawyers. I am not speaking on behalf of my employers. The opinions I express are mine alone. I am here in my individual capacity. So, to set the theme of this talk, I'll be using lyrics from various 80s artists, and as an added bonus, I made a custom Spotify playlist with 80s songs that kind of remind me of Stalkerware. So you can find that at the link to the GitHub repo on the bit.ly link. So when the police say that I'll be watching you, this translates to how Stalkerware is used to silently watch you. Fun fact, I was a victim of Stalkerware on and off for almost 2 years. It's a long story, just trust me on that. So in this talk, I will not focus on my experiences as a victim of Stalkerware. Instead, I'm going to focus on how Stalkerware can impact companies from not only the traditional use of Stalkerware, but also repurposing Stalkerware. But first, let's discuss the recent Stalkerware landscape. So, during the pandemic, the use of Stalkerware has increased a lot. And according to Avast, there has been a 51% increase in the use of Stalkerware. And Malwarebytes reports a 190% increase, while Avira says that they're seeing about a 99% increase in the use of Stalkerware. So why would you, as a security professional, care about that? It's just a domestic violence issue, right? It wouldn't possibly impact companies, or can it? So this talk will hopefully shed some light on what I've found through the course of my research on Stalkerware from a CTI perspective. So first, we'll explore Stalkerware, then we'll move on to traditional and non-traditional targets of Stalkerware and spyware. We'll discuss threat actor tradecraft, I'll offer some CTI hypotheses, and finally, some corporate solutions. So what is Stalkerware? I mean, I guess if you have flexible morality, you could have super spy abilities, but of course, spy music is not included. So, according to the Citizens Lab, stalkerware is used to facilitate intimate partner violence, abuse, or harassment, including pernicious intrusions into the targeted person's life by way of physical or digital actions. So, that could be the use of stalkerware, spyware, dual use apps, MRATs, shared accounts. So basically, some examples of intimate partner surveillance tools include, like I said, commodity stalkerware, shared accounts, OSINT, social media, people, receipts. It would be really easy, for instance, if I was an attacker, to go to my partner's family member and say, hey, I've been looking for so and so. Do you know where they're at? Or have you seen them? They said that they were with you. So I could just use social engineering to find out where where my partner is. So commodity stalkerware has basic active and passive data collection. And so generally it's like they can read your text messages, they can get your call logs, some of your chat apps, pictures, videos, browser history, and GPS location. And give or take, it's around like $50 to about $200 for a monthly, quarterly, or annual subscription, depending upon what you get. That's kind of like the bare minimum. From there, it gets even crazier, where it can read your apps and do a ton of stuff like check your battery life, modify internet settings, like modify your calendar, even. So, if you've ever been a victim of it and you had an important appointment deleted, you might not be going crazy. So there's that. It's really interesting. This provides you a layout of the various stalkerware variants and what capabilities you have with it. So this could be helpful if A, you're shopping for stalkerware, or B, if you're trying to get a better idea of what you think is going on based upon your experiences. So stalkerware is notorious for getting breached, and here are just some of them that have had issues. And these are some of the different stalkerware vendors out there, from Moby Stealth to MSpy, FlexiSpy. There's actually a really good technical write-up on FlexiSpy as well. So how does stalkerware work? Like, what is it exactly? So basically, it requires physical access to the device as well as internet access. For Android phones, you need the ability to install apps from unknown sources, and you need to disable Google Play Protect. For Apple devices, you either need to jailbreak the phone or you can spy using iCloud account access. And we couldn't get through this talk without using the Lockheed Martin kill chain. So for reconnaissance, the attacker will perform basic information gathering, such as where will my partner be? And I'll make myself the attacker. So, I'll keep tabs on what he does with his phone, when he's away from his phone, how I could possibly trick him to let me have access to his phone, right? And then from there, once I get a pretty good idea of how I can gain physical access to his phone without him knowing, what I would do is obtain a URL from the stalkerware vendor so that I could install it. Then I would grab the phone when I know he knows that I won't, like when he isn't expecting me to access it, then I will go to the URL, do all the stuff that I need to do, and get it installed, essentially. And the interesting thing about stalkerware is that commodity stalkerware, it doesn't really have any technical exploitation involved with it. It's more of a social engineering type of exploitation, like how can I convince him to give me his lock screen code, or How can I get him to lower his defenses so that I can watch the code that he punches in there? Stuff like that, right? So then you install it, and then you want to cover your tracks. Of course, every good attacker covers their tracks. And command and control usually happens over Wi-Fi, sometimes over cell, but you can modify that setting. So it doesn't have to be that. And basically, for actions on objectives, that can be up to the individual attacker. Do I want to look over who he's talking to on his text messages, on his messaging apps? Do I want to know who he's calling? Do I want to know his email? All of that, right? It depends on what I'm interested in. So commodity stalkerware is kind of easy to use. The stalkerware vendors are really helpful. They actually, some of them have like a 24/7 hotline where, let's say I get the phone and it's like 3 a.m. and my partner's sleeping. I can be like, hey, stalkerware vendor, can you help me do this? Because I don't have technical skills. That's also another added benefit of commodity stalkerware, where I don't have to have any technical skills whatsoever in order to use it. And the capabilities are very similar to an MRAT/spyware. So that's an added bonus. And the only drawback is that I need to have physical access to the device. Also, too, like I said, it could be, kind of illegal depending upon the states, all of that. So, like a lot of the stalkerware vendors rely on the users to get consent. So, I definitely did not consent to having stalkerware on my device. So, okay. Then we have MRAT. So an MRAT is mobile rat. So it can be cheap-ish. It requires specific knowledge to obtain. It does require user interaction, and there's a lot of technical skill with it, and it's illegal. So we're going to talk a little bit about MITRE ATT&CK. They have a mobile attack where you can look up the different tactics, techniques, and procedures. One of them I just want to highlight really quick. It talks about a lock screen bypass. And so what happened with me on one of my devices is my partner used dental mold to bypass my lock screen. So the attackers can get very, very creative with like how they gain access to your device. So this is actually a report from Citizens Lab, and the reason why I included it is to show how stalkerware is viewed by antivirus detection. Like, the existing tools aren't really effective at detecting or remediating stalkerware. Anti-spyware doesn't really flag dual-use apps, and Kaspersky offers an alert for Android users when stalkerware is found. Malwarebytes has been blocking stalkerware since 2014. Basically, AV detection is not that great. So that's also good for attackers. Oh, and I think it was recently, Google Play, Google just recently released a policy where they stated that stalkerware-related apps on the Google Play Store, they absolutely must notify users that they are being monitored. So that is a step in a good direction. And the other wonderful thing is that Ava Galperin at the EFF, she's working really hard with the Coalition Against Stalkerware to work together and inform the antivirus vendors that they need to alert on and take stalkerware seriously. So they're working from that angle, and I thank them for doing that. So now we're going to talk about some of the traditional targets of stalkerware. And the problem with stalkerware is that generally when people use stalkerware, it's like everyday people like myself. So this is where relationships come in, and a lot of the intimate partner violence and all of that, right? So now we're going to look at similar surveillance capabilities as stalkerware. So there's the parental apps that are used against children, so children are targets. Employees are targets, being monitored by their boss. GPS location tracked. I worked at a place that tracked all of their employees, so it does happen. The other thing are journalists. So journalists are often targets of stalkerware. For instance, a Washington Post reporter was assassinated, and then a friend of the assassinated reporter claims that the Saudis used spyware to monitor communications with the journalist. So, like this slide here shows you a ton of different journalists that have been targeted with stalkerware. It's also used against dissidents. So allegedly, Black Lives Matter protesters were targeted in 2014 in Chicago by law enforcement. China has been leveraging WeChat to spy on its citizens. Hong Kong residents were targeted via a watering hole attack to install iPhone spyware. And Tibetans working for the Dalai Lama have been targeted with spyware. Muslims have been targeted by Chinese hackers via watering hole attacks as well with an iPhone exploit. And I read recently that people affiliated with the Catholic Church were also targeted. So there's really no one that's safe. Of course, criminals are also targets. Terrorists. So this is a really good story. European law enforcement, they were using NSO group spyware via a WhatsApp exploit to track a terrorist. So WhatsApp found out about that, and they notified about 1,400 users that they had been hacked as a result of this exploit. And so the terrorists happened to be in the people that were notified. So this caused the terrorists to go dark and discarding the phone and, moving on. So law enforcement, of course, couldn't continue following this terrorist. So, oops. So Spain has been suspected of domestic espionage against Catalan politicians and pro-independence movement leaders because their cell phones were targeted with spyware. A report by Lookout describes how an MRAT called Stealth Mango is used against government officials, military, activists in Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, Iraq, UAE, and of course, because those people were targeted, there was also an indirect data compromise of government officials and civilians from the United States, Australia, the UK, and Iran. Another interesting story is that, for instance, dual-use apps, TikTok, I know that that's been really big in the news. Of course, the U.S. Army and U.S. Navy banned TikTok. But we'll see how that changes since Cisco is coming into the picture. So now we'll talk about operators, and traditional operators of stalkerware is, of course, relationships, intimate partner violence, and technical abuse. The other one is, it's really interesting that the stalkerware vendors that are breached, Motherboard actually filed a legal complaint against the Metropolitan Police for purchasing FlexiSpy. Their information showed up in the data dump, And Moby Stealth. Data was stolen by a hacker and given to Motherboard, and it revealed customer accounts linked to the military, FBI, ICE, DHS, TSA, and several branches of the US military. So who knows if they were using it for official means or if they were just using their official email to sign up for this stuff. So now we'll talk about similar surveillance capabilities as Stalkerware and for operators. This one, of course, parents, and then schools. Seattle schools in the United States, they decided to spy on students via their webcams. So the parents found out all of that, right? Big drama. They were taken to court, and they ended up settling for about $610,000. That's a lot of money. Of course, companies as well. So in March, when the pandemic kind of started, bosses across everywhere were scrambling to buy spy software to monitor employees. Just in general, the FTC banned Retina X, which was a Stalkerware company, from selling Stalkerware, period. And then recently, Barclays, which is a bank, they were caught spying on their employees, and people didn't like that, so they are currently under investigation. It's also operators are cybercrime and hacktivists. So, of course, criminals and terrorists use it. A really fun story about this is El Chapo. So he loved to use spyware against his partners and leaders of his organization. But the funny thing is, he used it to monitor his people, but he didn't realize that the FBI could also use it to collect intel on him. So that ended up being his actual demise. The beginning of the end. So law enforcement uses it. I already said the Metropolitan Police were allegedly using it. Miami Police in the United States, they have their own spyware. It's by Penlink. I don't know the name of it, but it's by Penlink. The Swedish police, they got approval to install spyware on criminals' phones. And CityLab, they reveal that some police departments bought extraction devices made by Israeli firm Cellebrite that allows cops to gather visible and hidden or deleted data. They also invest in cell phone interception devices. And like I said before, law enforcement is routinely found in Stalkerware company breaches as customers. So nation states, here's a good story. So colleagues of Javier Valdez Cardenas, he's known for investigating drug cartels, and they were targeted just days after his death because someone killed him, right? And they were targeted with Pegasus, which is linked to Reckless One, which is a Mexican government APT. Spain is also accused of being a client of NSO since about 2015. Lookout put out a report on Stealth Mango, and I spoke about that earlier. And it's basically believed to be linked to the Pakistani military, and they use it against Pakistan officials, citizens, Afghanistan officials, on and on. And also APT-15, as another example, they're an APT that's believed to operate on behalf of the Chinese government, and they were linked to using Android spyware. So now we'll talk a little bit about hostile actor tradecraft. So Kimber, this particular hostile actor, they tend to use shared accounts, dual-use apps, unilaterally manipulate friends, family, unilaterally use like shared family plans, all of that against the victim. And there's oftentimes emotional and psychological abuse that goes along with that. So Suki Win is more geared towards commodity stalkerware or spyware. Not really a lot of technical skill, or if they do, they just go with whatever's easiest and just get it done. I just want to spy on this person type of thing. And of course, there's usually emotional or psychological abuse that goes along with this particular hostile actor. So Electra uses an MRAT, and this hostile actor is highly technical, highly skilled in APT, threat actor tradecraft, uses social engineering, and of course, emotional and psychological abuse, manipulation, all of that. And finally, Poison Hydra. So Poison Hydra is like, I don't care about all that. Just give me your damn phone, or I will physically hurt you or your children or your pet or whatever. They use a lot of physical threats and abuse to gain access to the device or whatever it is. So, of course, that's emotional and psychological abuse as well. So now we're going to get into some CTI hypotheses of the normal use of commodity stalkerware. So with corporate America, I usually recommend like figuring out, do you have an MDM server? Do you like how is your BYOD? Can people install apps on their phone whenever they want? Like how is your guest Wi-Fi? Is it monitored? Like what's going on? Really get to understand your particular environment. You already know that. So this is a really important slide. So Checkpoint discovered that 75% of a multinational company's mobile devices were infected with an MRAT. So the MDM server, it was compromised and used to push the mobile rat to the org's mobile devices. So why would you care about that? It was a big deal because when anyone accessed any of the corporate resources with creds, those creds, along with the 2FA codes, were compromised. So the org had to do a factory reset for all mobile devices. Another good story related to mobile device management is Orange, principal security researcher at DevCore. Recently, he gave a talk at HitCon, and he shared how he got remote code execution, RCE, on Mobile Iron, which is a MDM software. So how hard would it be to chain a couple vulnerabilities together, or just one really good one, like an RCE, to compromise your mobile device management software and push out malicious app to grab creds, 2FA codes, and more? Also, just as a little aside, the MDM attacks aren't new. Cisco Talos was actually talking about this in 2018. I'm just bringing more awareness to this issue and providing additional context. So stalkerware vendors, like I've said, they have notoriously horrible poor security practices. They have a ton of misconfigs. SpyPhone had an S3 bucket open to the planet. They get breached often because hacktivists hate them. And then also too, sometimes, most of the time, a lot of the time, they have unencrypted transmission. So what about man in the middle? I mean, all I'd have to do is just do that, right? Instead of the work of compromising them. So here's a list of stalkerware vendor breaches. As you can see, it's a lot. And the bad thing, though, is in the Retina X breach, pics from an active police investigation were found. Also, too, notable mention was the hacking team that sells spyware to governments. They were hacked. And Gamut International was hacked too. And docs on Finn Fisher government spy tool were leaked. So I took the statistics of people impacted by intimate partner violence. For women, it was 1 out of 3, and men, it was 1 out of 6. And for the non-binary folks, I didn't forget about you. The statistics only had male and female. So then I used a sample company size of about 20,000, right? I picked a random number to figure out how many people at the organization could be impacted by intimate partner violence, which was approximately 25% of the employees. So then next, I took a statistic from the National Network to End Domestic Violence that said approximately 54% of intimate partner violence survivors were tracked with Stalkerware at some point. So 54% of 25% of the sample 20,000 company size equates to approximately 13.5% of the employees have been impacted by Stalkerware at one point in their lives. So let's talk a little bit about Argentina. In Argentina, I looked this up in Latin America, they said 1 in 3 women have suffered physical or sexual violence in an intimate relationship. I didn't know that until I did the research. Just as a little aside, my family is from Mexico and had to flee the country due to a very serious domestic violence situation a long time ago. So I can totally relate to this figure. And also, too, according to the United Nations, since the pandemic, there's been about a 39% increase in domestic violence in Argentina. Line 144, it's a 24/7 free helpline for situations of gender violence, gender-based violence, and they report that from March until July of 2020 that there was a 25% increase in the amount of calls that they got. Also, too, in 2019, Argentina, the attempted Stalkerware installations grew by about 79% compared to 2018. And Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Colombia, and Peru, they saw an increase of 172%, and are some of the countries with the most records of attempts to install Stalkerware on user devices in 2019. So why would we care about this information from a CTI perspective, at least in the United States? So on the previous slide, 13.5% of the, estimated employee base may have experienced technological abuse at some time in their life. So when I was in my personal Stalkerware situation, my attacker attempted to break into my work phone too. I'm not a mental health professional, but it seems that attackers that like to use Stalkerware, their decision-making abilities might be impaired. So if corporations essentially put their foot down and to allow Stalkerware traffic with repercussions, such as notifying the victim or reporting the abuser to HR, an insider threat, or whatever type of whatever investigations you have if the abuser is an employee. So creating a policy around Stalkerware related traffic might deter the abuser while also protecting the organization and creating a safe space, at least when the employee is there. And of course, that's when we're back in the office. So this is, of course, easy to circumvent by not using company Wi-Fi to access the Stalkerware interface to check on the victim. But it's just one idea. Another reason to bring this to your attention is that once the pandemic is over and people come back into the office, you might have to deal with Stalkerware traffic. What are you going to do? Solve this problem now, essentially. So now we're going to talk about the repurposed use of commodity Stalkerware. So we could install hacking tools as one example on a personal device and see how we could pivot from that device to, I don't know, let's say an IoT device or a printer or something else that doesn't necessarily get patched possibly often or at all. It can, of course, be used against your executives and employees. Jeff Bezos, he's the CEO of Amazon. His iPhone was hacked. I think it was in 2018, and it gave the attackers access to his photos and texts, and the hack was linked to the Saudi government. Of course, competitors can use it as well to track what your key decision makers are up to and doing. So, which country has been routinely accused of industrial espionage? I'll wait. Yeah, I'm guessing maybe the first one that pops into your mind when you think of intellectual property theft. I'm not going to name them. So Stalkerware could be used to aid those efforts and keep their insiders in place a little bit longer, as one example. So here's some solutions. This is from a Citizens Lab report. They have a ton of IOCs, and I also included that in the IOC report, which I'll show you later. And they suggest disallowing, do not disallow jailbroken devices, and only allow specific apps on phones, and like remove WeChat, since WeChat is used against China to spy on their citizens, or TikTok, but I guess that'll change moving forward depending upon what Cisco does. You can also tabletop, so think about how you would monetize your organization's data and then kind of go from there. In the event of poor security practices and the Stalkerware vendor gets breached and your documents are out there, whatever it is, how would you deal with takedown of asking the Stalkerware vendor, hey, that's our proprietary data, please take that down? Like, they are notorious for not responding. Like, what will you do? Also, too, what happens if bad guys or gals attempt to extort you for whatever data is out there? How will you handle that? And then finally, MDM server, MDM software, whatever you got going on. Like, what type of alerting, what type of detection do you have around it? What's the worst case scenario of your MDM solution being compromised? Like, think about that. Awareness. So Chris Cox with Operation Safe Escape is a really great resource. And these are just high-level tips, like never leave your smartphone unattended, always delete unused apps, regularly search for suspicious apps or activity on your phone. Definitely use a quality password manager, never share your passwords with anyone. I mean, these are common sense, right? And then some resources. Tall Poppy actually works with corporations to help them deal with Stalkerware issues. Safe Escape, National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, Line 144 is another one. There's also a tech consultation questionnaire, Compliments of Cornell. So I shared with you Stalkerware, spyware, MRATs, dual-use apps, and that data access varies by vendor and type of Stalkerware. We went over some of the traditional and non-traditional users and targets of Stalkerware, that there's basically suboptimal AV detection, and you need to do org-specific threat modeling. But I have one more thing. So what I did, I ran a scenario thinking, okay, so let's pretend my company gets compromised. Like, what do I do? I did two different options to see how quickly I could get up to speed with finding out what the APK is doing, and then being able to report that to management, right? So Christina Balam, she had a YouTube video. I watched that. She had two of them, actually. I watched the videos, installed the tools. I used APK tool, Dex to Jar, and JD GUI. And then I compared that, and I'll step through what I did so that I can triage it and know how long it would take me to complete certain things. So APK tool, I used it to decompile and look at the different permissions that Android manifest XML was requesting. So that's good. And then I used Dex to Jar to convert the classes.dex file to a jar file, which I then read in JD GUI here. And I'm not going to name the name, but you can see it in the picture there, what I was using. Another option, if you're not too concerned about OPSEC, is decompiler.com. I threw it in there and got the same permissions. VirusTotal is another option. It also provides valuable feedback, and it has the same permissions and the strings that I was looking for that I was able to get from manually reversing it as well, or at least analyzing it. Hybrid analysis is another option, and they also have TTPs. I tried throwing it and doing the Ghidra thing, but I already had the information I needed, so I decided to move on and pivot. So I took the Citizens Lab report and started doing research on that. So I threw it in VirusTotal, and then I pivoted from there and got the APK, and then I got the HTTP requests. Then next, I looked at the Stalkerware vendor breaches, and I thought, that might be a good source for additional, OSINT source for finding Stalkerware. Another one, a while back, there was a huge debate on Twitter about a company that was writing articles related to spying on their wife. So I looked that up and found Stalkerware related to that particular search on Google. And then I also did that as well in Spanish. And then I went to the Google Play Store because Stalkerware spyware is up in there, and I used a typical name. And then I went to the developer website, and I was able to download copies and get the IOCs from there. You can also look at the SSL certs, TLS certs, all of that, and pivot off from there. Like, you can get additional domains. And then another really great resource are security researchers. So NS Crew Tables, he has also a repo of a ton of stuff. And Twitter. So Twitter is actually another really great source. I just did hashtag Stalkerware and then APK, and it brought up a ton of entries related to Stalkerware. And then Malware Hunter team, they like to post stuff that has like very low AV detection. So I just threw their handle in Twitter with APK and got a ton of stuff and included that in the IOC list. And another really fun fact is using URL categorization. So at your org, you can change that so that it's blocked or whatever you're using, right? So one of them, it was listed as education and health. And that was really funny. And then, of course, another one listed it as bad. So then I took all of the samples to VirusTotal, and I wanted to see what was going on with Argentina over the past 90 days. And so I picked some common, like, app permission requests, like location. I want to be able to use your camera, being on there. And I want to read your text messages. It was just something random I threw out. And to help decrease the false positives, and knowing that Stalkerware has a very low AV detection, I just did, greater than 2 AV detections, AV engines detected it as bad. And so I got about 10 files there. So then I removed Argentina as a submitter, and I got about a little over 22,000. So imagine you want to attack an org. What settings or permissions would you care about? So I would probably want to exfil the data and make sure I was actually at the right location to exfil the data. So what does that mean? GPS location and the ability to write to external storage, right? So I created that detection with greater than 13 AV engines detecting it to help reduce false positives, and I got about 47 of these files submitted from Argentina. Then next, I just wanted to look at APKs that read your text messages and that were detected as malicious, and I got over 254. And then finally, I came across an interesting APK that was using Pornhub for its icon. So when I use the icon hash to pivot to find other files using Pornhub icon, with at least 5 AV engines detecting it as malicious, it returned about 600 files. So this is the GitHub. There's a threat summary report for you to put in your TIP threat intelligence platform and IOX for you to be able to run down in your environment. It's at this link. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate you coming to my talk. So I'll see you at the live session for Q&A.